So I'd like to introduce the first speaker for this evening, someone who has been a proponent of railway electrification for decades, if I'm not mistaken. Dr. Tilak Siambalapitiya. He's the managing director of RMA Private Limited. Dr. Tilak, please enlighten the audience with the information that you have ready to share with us.
Dr. Tilak, we could not hear you.
Now it should be all right.
Yes, please.
So good evening to all of you. My task today is to introduce to you the KV line project for the benefit of those of you who are perhaps not too familiar about the project, and follow on with the present status of the project and the issues that have come up about the design of the project. Let me briefly take you through the timeline of various railway electrification initiatives. As far back as 1924, DJ Vimala Surendra published a paper about how hydropower and the electricity generated from it could be used for electric propulsion. Thereafter, there were various studies by the government, the Ministry of Transport, the Institution of Engineers, individual researchers, and transport specialists. And we quickly come to year 2008, when there was a fresh initiative by the Institution of Engineers, Sri Lanka Railways, and the Ceylon Electricity Board, who conducted a joint study, at the end of which it was recommended that Panadura to Veyangoda sector should be the sector to be electrified first. Nothing much happened until 2015, when the Ministry of Transport and the Ministry of Power and Energy picked up the subject again and went through with a cabinet approval to initiate the electrification of the urban railway system. And immediately thereafter, the technical assistance from the Asian Development Bank was sought to begin the project. Now, beginning the project is from scratch. There was not even a comprehensive project proposal. In 2016, the Ministry of Transport established the project management unit. And in 2017, the pre-feasibility study was completed under technical assistance from the Asian Development Bank through a grant, which analyzed in detail at a pre-feasibility level the electrification and upgrade of the Panadura Veyangoda sector. The study also included an options study for the KV line. Now we move on to year 2018, when a consultant was appointed, this time under a loan facility from the Asian Development Bank, to go ahead with a comprehensive feasibility study. And this consultant so far has completed the feasibility study, detailed designs, and I believe bid documents as well for the KV line. So these documents started coming out in 2018, were revised in 2018 again, and revised in April 2019 as a result of various comments. And as of now, the same consultant who was given the task to complete the main line and the coastal line and the Putlam line upgrading and electrification designs have also been completed very recently, just a couple of months ago. So that's the status of the project. No lines have been built, no loans have been signed up, but the project is in a fairly long preparatory phase. Now, what is this Kalani Valley line? Originally, it was a narrow gauge line, which went all the way up to Yatiantota, and perhaps that's why it was called Kalani Valley, because Yatiantota is near Kalani Ganga. Of course, various sections have been abandoned from time to time, and it has been broad gauged and now operates as a broad gauged single track service up to Avissavella. It serves typically towns of Narahenpita, Nugegoda, Maharagama, Homagama, Paduka, and Avissavella. And the line is full of curves, and the quality is not that good. Of course, in the longer term, in the master plans, there are proposals to extend it to Hambantota through Ratnapura. You will see on the left-hand side the map of Sri Lanka, and what this line is, the red line starting from Colombo, going towards Avissavella. There have been certain questions. Perhaps I will answer them in a Q&A session on this slide. Who conducts the feasibility study, or who conducted the feasibility study? It was conducted by a consulting consortium led by Dowa Engineering of South Korea. And by 2019, their final report for the KV line was issued. And who is their host? It is a project management unit of the Ministry of Transport, which was established in 2016. And the results are expected, of course, as the studies go on, are expected to be presented and reviewed by a steering committee. And who is financing the feasibility studies? It's the Asian Development Bank through a loan to the government of Sri Lanka. Now, what is the scope of the activities that are going on? Are the detailed feasibility studies, detailed engineering, and the bid documents to implement the project. Now, what is the project? The project is now called the Colombo Suburban Railway Project, and it includes the main line, the coastal line, the Kalani Valley line, and the Putlam line to cover basically the suburbs of Colombo, upgrading and electrification. Now we move on to the subject under discussion, which is specifically the Kalani Valley line. As I said earlier, the detailed feasibility report was issued in 2019. And this diagram summarizes the structure of the proposal by the consultant. From Maradana to Malapalla, which is before Homagama, the line will be elevated, it will be double track, and it will be electrified. Then from Malapalla onwards through Homagama up to Paduka, it will be double track, but not elevated. It will be going at ground level. And beyond Paduka up to Avissavella, it will be single track and it will not be electrified. And I have written down the distances approximately below there. So from Maradana, or that means Colombo, to Paduka, it will be an electric train service. And from Paduka to Avissavella, it will be diesel trains. So therefore, people coming from Avissavella will have to change trains at Paduka. The KV line, I'm just highlighting the designs and the problems, is full of curves. It's not news to anybody. So I have picked this up from the feasibility report that was published in April last year. And this shows several curves which have a radius of 120 meter. And there's one curve which is 150 meter, which are very sharp curves. And the consultant has recommended through various analysis to retain most of the critical curves in both the elevated section as well as the at-grade section, because according to the consultant's calculations, spending money to straighten these curves will not be viable, or they will be too expensive. The consultant also has estimated the passenger demand, and it's unclear as to exactly what the present passenger demand is. But there were several forecasts that were published from time to time on the number of expected passenger trips in 2025. And why 2025? So that is the first year that the project is expected to become operational and the services be available to passengers. And we have seen forecasts ranging from 480,000 down to 176,000 per day as the number of passengers on a typical weekday who will get on to this train to make a trip. And the last official report talks about 273,000 passenger trips per day. So therefore there is some ambiguity and perhaps needs some more analysis to ensure that the passenger forecast is in the correct range. Now, there's another important parameter, because as you can imagine, the maximum number of passengers asking for this service in the peak hour will determine the frequency of trains. The line has to be designed to meet the peak requirement. So therefore, the consultant's latest report has estimated there will be 18,000 passengers per hour at the peak hour in year 2025. So if we say that there will be trains of 10 carriages each, that will be approximately 2,000 passengers in a train. It will require 9 trains. And the consultant has quite rightly proposed a 12-car train as well, so that you increase the capacity. So in that case, it will be 8 trains per hour. So approximately, the consultant has recommended there will be trains at 7-minute intervals to meet the passenger demand of 18,000 passengers per hour in the peak period, in the peak direction. Of course, the consultant has also assumed that the level crossings will close for 3 minutes, because this becomes very important, because if there are trains very frequently and if the level crossings close for 3 minutes, perhaps it's going to cause a major traffic jam. So therefore, this is a matter that has been discussed quite a lot. If we, and I have a video here, perhaps the 3-minute assumption may be a little bit excessive for some of the crossings. I have a video here of the Castle Street crossing taken at the peak hour, and while it is playing, we will discuss. So the consultant has largely based his recommendations on his observations in a level crossing in UK. And perhaps that line has a larger number of trains going up and down. So what we observe is that in Sri Lanka, it is most likely to be shorter. So the gate has closed now, as you see on the right-hand side, and the train has still not approached. We are into 45 seconds of the gate closure, obviously for the safety. The train has now arrived and moving across rather slowly. That's not the speed we expect. It's a 7-carriage diesel multiple unit moving rather slowly across Castle Street. And as we will see, the train has now passed. It's in 1 minute and 10 seconds. It will take a few more seconds for the traffic flow to be re-established. So perhaps the gate closure time also would have to be reviewed along with the number of passengers in terms of the total passenger count and the number of passengers expected in the peak period. So, so these assumptions obviously by the consultant has led to the decision that the line cannot be managed at the ground level. So it has to be elevated from Colombo to Malapallam, which is before Homagama. So the next concern has been the project cost. So there have been several cost estimates published. Initially $2,500 million. Of course, the latest official report says the project cost will be 1,425 million. And of course, it is still stamped as a preliminary detailed cost estimate. Perhaps the consultant is still reviewing the cost because the latest report also says it is preliminary. But then 1,425 for Sri Lanka, it's a high value project. In my assessment, in fact, it is the largest single project ever to be proposed to be built in Sri Lanka. If you consider the accelerated Mahavali project, at that time, it was a $1,000 million project. Hambantota Harbour, there are various numbers ranging between 800 million to $1,200 million. So therefore, for Sri Lanka, this project is very large. So therefore, there is a requirement, in my view, for more rigorous assessment to check whether the passenger forecast is correct, whether the engineering design is correct, whether the cost estimate is correct. Perhaps there are ways of reducing the costs. So these require further analysis given the magnitude of the project. Now, another feature that we have observed is that for the project to be financially viable, the passenger ticket prices will have to be increased by 1.3 times. So that is the consultant's calculation. Say, for example, a rupees 100 ticket today will cost 230 rupees to cover operation and maintenance costs largely, and that too if the passenger forecast materializes. Of course, the loan capital for the investments and the interest on the loan would have to be repaid by the treasury. So the question many people ask is whether the KV line electrification project is now abandoned. I can only throw some light on the facts that are in the public domain. By end 2019, the Asian Development Bank commenced a review of the project, specifically on the passenger demand and the economic analysis and the station architecture. And the results are awaited. I have not seen the results. So the results are awaited as to what they have to say from the point of view of a prospective financier who was assumed to be the financier of choice for this project. And the Institution of Engineers has announced that they have been submitting comments since October 2018, progressively, step by step, first to the project management unit, then to the Ministry of Transport, then to the Ministry of Finance, and then to the Asian Development Bank, and finally, in July 2020, to HE, the President. So, of course, the ISL has called for the project to be implemented on the designs already prepared after making essential amendments to ensure the best value of public funds spent on the project. I continue. In September 2020, the Asian Development Bank has stated that the project is not in the country operations business plan. In October 2020, the feasibility reports for the main line, coastline, and Putlam line were also issued by the Ministry of Transport. And the work is continuing to be funded by the Asian Development Bank. And there are other railway projects which are already being funded by the Asian Development Bank, which are in progress. So, is the KV line project now abandoned? I don't think so. Most likely the government decided to pause, pending the ongoing ADB review and considering the need to prioritize investment commitments during the current economic downturn. So in my view, how may the project proceed to the next step of financing? There is a requirement to reassess the passenger demand and the required train frequency. And there's a requirement for the design to be cost effective or a lean design, and to be cautious about cost estimates, ensuring the economic viability. Of course, we should not be compromising in the future potential for the KV line to become a link to Sabaragama and the south in the longer term. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Siambalapitiya, for that informative presentation. So now we are moving on to the second presentation of the evening. That will be basically on demand estimation. And we have a specialist in that arena to enlighten you on that particular topic. I'd like to invite Dr. T. Sivakumar, who's the president of the Sri Lanka Society of Transport and Logistics, and also a senior lecturer at the Department of Transport and Logistics Management at the University of Moratuwa. Dr. Siva, over to you.
Thank you, Nilesh. Thank you, Dr. Siambalapitiya, for the fundamental facts put in place, make us easy to go carry on. Once again, good evening to you all. Let me take the traffic demand estimation, which we look at as a speculation. The transport demand estimation, fundamentally very important. That is the base for any decision making. So I just for completeness, let me put some of the key features. Any projects which must be look at the present scenario and what is happening at the ground right now, and then estimating for the future. So the number of passengers who will be benefited, one of the question, and then the frequency of the train operation, which slightly touched by Dr. Tilak, and the rest of the speakers also will be touching on, and the train size, whether it is a large or small, and then depends on the train size, then the frequency, and so on. So the size of the infrastructure, number of tracks, platform size, station size, etc. Then the frequency of road crossings and gate closures and grade separations, whether the traffic at grade or train at grade, is all these to be designed and discussed and designed based on the demand estimation. Finally, the economic benefit that should be greater than the cost, and the revenue expected to be to ensure the financial viability. So those things will be touched in the later part of this webinar. So let me start from the number one item is the passenger per hour per direction. There are different numbers flowing, and I could see the curiosity among all the citizens in these days. There are different numbers, which one is correct, and so on. So basically, the role for this today's webinar is to put forward what are the numbers on the paper submitted by the consultants, and whereas what could be the possible estimation based on the ground situation now. So let me take what consultants has submitted. There are various submissions, but let me take at least the recent submission. So the maximum passenger per hour per direction among the various sections they have considered, and then they have identified Nugegoda Kirlapana as the peak section in this corridor. And then the peak hour or maximum passenger per hour per direction SPD is estimated 18,405 in 2025, in 5 years down the line. And then it is 20,973 in 2035. This estimation by the consultants requires 7 trains per hour to serve this estimated numbers. That in terms calculating the headway is 7 minutes. That means every 7 minutes there will be a train. So consultant conclusions arises from the above finding. One is the frequency justify the elevation. Why? When there is more train, more frequency, the gate closures are the time for gate closures are high. So there will be a conflict between the train movement and the vehicular movement. So consultants justifying the elevation. Then high passenger demand justifies the economic cost of elevation. So both of their conclusions arises from this number what they have identified. So let's clear what we have estimated from the numbers what is available and from the facts we have what is in our hand. What we have calculated in the historical side, 2019, the maximum, again the same index we are referring, the maximum passenger per hour per direction is 1,215 in 2009, and 2016 it was 4,000, around 4,000, and then up to 2020 it was maintaining, mainly because the supply didn't change, so there could not be expected any more demands. So basically this is the maximum demand right now it is happening by the KV line in the history. Then looking at the 2016 data, if you see one of the report that EGIS has estimated the flow, directional flow as 24,000, which you can easily calculate to that will comes as a peak demand as 4,200, roughly balancing to what we have estimated. But unfortunately, the consultant report submitted, we could not see any present scenario or present data, not even to the EGIS report what was presented in 2017. Then on the other side, the peak section was based on our calculation, based on the 16 data. What we have calculated is the peak section is Nugegoda Udahamulla, based on the, but then what the consultant has identified, I don't know based on which development plan they have identified this Nugegoda Kilopena section as the peak section. That is also a question. Then the big question in front of us is in the report, there is no base case data collection was not done or not presented. So the readers are clueless about what has happened to the present. Let me continue on the peak hour directional flow plus the modal share, the historical modal share. Again, this is what we have estimated, and we have done some number crunching, and 2009, 2012, 2016, and 2019. These are what we have estimated. And interestingly, based on this historical data, what we have forecasted is 5,391. Whereas the consultant has projected for this 2025 is 18,405. This is where the question starts. So where it comes from. And if you look at the screen, then what is estimated by the consultant is 18,000 odd, and then what is really estimated from the past history is 5,000 odd. Then the balance is 13,000 odd passenger movement should come from the road users. So the balance 13,000 should be attracted from road traffic if the consultant numbers are correct. Then most interestingly, you can note that I put it in green because at least from their numbers, which leaves us to the assumption that the road will be, after the implementing an operation in 2025, the road will carry only balance 3,000 odd passenger flow on the roads. So which sometime we can consider it as a positive sign of it, but let's keep that in mind. We will discuss that. The historical flow of passenger to Colombo, when we consider the CMC cordon, CMC area, the traffic entering to Colombo, Colombo, based on the 2012-2019 data, roughly the growth rate is 3.2%, the road passenger growth rate. And if you take this particular corridor where the KV line is concerned, A4 road, which will be only 1.4. But let's take 3.2 as the case. Then the resulting maximum passenger per hour per direction in this particular corridor would be estimated as 21,493. Then if you compare this with the consultant number, the meaning is that during the peak time, 86% of the passengers on the corridor should be traveled by train. So keep it in mind that 84% of the passengers from the road users will be attracted by the train. Whereas you can see in the past, go back to the table, 2012 it was generally. 2012 it was 10.6, and 2019 it was to 24.2, and roughly what we have estimated is 25.1. So you can see generally the possible modal share will be somewhere there, but then what the consultant has calculated is somewhere not justifiable. Let's compare the other lines. Again, is our estimation. The main line carries 23,000, making 30% of the peak, and then the coastal line carries about 14,000, making 25% about the modal share. And thus it is clear that in the case of KV line, the peak hour demand or peak sectional demand has been overestimated from 2 to 3 times. So this is one of the question the consultant to revise their calculations. Thus, estimates based on the actual data would be, as previous slide what I mentioned, is 5,391. That means compared to consultant numbers, it is only 29% of the consultant's value. Then if you compare the train per hour, it is only based on this 5,000 odd number, only 2 numbers is adequate, whereas the consultant has estimated 7 trains per hour. Similarly, the passengers and train operations for the rest of the day, because all these numbers in their report was based on the peak section demand. But whereas what happens to the off-peak? Are we calculating the same trend, or are there any estimation has been done per hourly basis or seasonal off-peak peak basis? We couldn't find anything in the report. So that's where the problems are, be concerns. And let's look at why these all happenings. So what is how this overestimation is being justified by them? Then they have taken the population as the tool, and where I have some concerns. So let's see this graph. The first one is the census statistical population growth. So in 5.9 in 2012 and 6.1 in 2018, which were actual. And then if you project this based on the past, the census data will say 2025 is 6.5 and 2035 will be 7. Let's take the recent project by JICA, that is Comtrans project, which is also slightly overestimating, but they have 3 different scenarios. We will be seeing that later. But then the megapolis, you can see the third layer of the graph, which is estimated 2020 it is 6.9, and then 2025 it is 7.8 million, and 2035 it is 8.8 million. So interesting to know the trend. So we can see here up to 2018, say what is the reality. So the census data is the actual, what has happened in the ground, what is happening now. And look at the three scenarios taken by the Comtrans project, the low, low scenario, medium scenario, and high scenario. Then easily one can say that the census data, or otherwise the actual trend, is following the low scenario of the Comtrans project. So we can ideally talking about, we have to follow this one. Even if you want to safe side, say you can consider the medium side, but that is also not happening if you look at the 2020, the present data. But whereas the consultant has submitted or considered the population, which is the megapolis, what they have calculated, 2020 is 6.9. You can see how much we are already above the actual. That is 0.8 million is overestimated. And if you go to 2025, it is 7.8, still higher than the high scenario of the the Comtrans data, which is, again, compared to the actual, it is 1.3 million overestimated. Then again, the same scenario goes in 3035, it's 1.8 million overestimated. So basically, it's overestimated by 20 to 25% is overestimated. So when the population is overestimated, the demand forecast is also will be affected. That might be the case, but has happened to this report. Then again, let me show you some of the calculation which we have done. And this is presenting the number of trips and the number of passengers in terms of the private vehicle, public transport, and the KV line. So you can see the A4 road and the KV line comparison. And in 2018, the number of trips and the number of passengers is presented here. Most interestingly, you can go to the model, share the percentage. You can see different section has different percentage. For an example, the Kirlapana case, you can see 36% of the private mode share and the public transport is 52, and the balance around 13% is KV line. Whereas this present scenario, again, I'm coming back in the report, we couldn't see any present data. So consultant has jumped and estimate 2025 and 2035 estimations, but we couldn't see anything about present, whether in 2018 or 2019 or 2020, the present data is missing. Then let's compare what we have calculated as a present in 2018, and then let's compare the project scenario by 2025 and 2035. And as you remember, the current percentage or a modal share, possibly by even main line and coastal line, it was around 30%. So even if you take the case of world examples, whether you get the most sexiest, attractive train on the ground, you will not get 100% attraction. The road will empty, never will happen. So what is the reality is 30 to 35% of the attraction will goes to rail. The rest is still using the other modes of transport, private and public. So you can see here what has happened. Again, I am taking the case of Kirlapana. The project scenario has taken 47% in 2025 and 50% in rail, which generally not a realistic number. Then again, let's say Kirlapana case again, if you see 14,000 is the number of passenger per direction. And then if you compare that with 2025, it is increased to 97,000. How? Nobody knows. There no judgment is given. 1 point. Second, while the KV line is going such a high numbers, increase from 14 to 97,000, there is a increase in the other traffics also. This where I put a green box in the previous one of the box. I thought the number of vehicles on the road is decreasing, but then that is also increasing. 41,000 become 45,000, 61 become 63,000. So no relief to the road also, even after KV line is operation. So these are some of the questions we have the consultant to answer. So overestimation of the population and other developments, which is not happening. So though the project has identified different developments along this corridor, so far till 2020, there is no development has taken place. So what is it? So as a summary, the both projects like Comtrans, Megapolis and everything, based on what they have taken the numbers, is overestimated. So population is obviously overestimated. So compared to the census statistics, which is actual. Then currently the Western province follow the low population growth, as I indicated, and 2013 with an annual population growth rate of approximately 0.8, whereas the consultant has taken almost more than 2 to 2.5% of the growth rate. In order to achieve the demand in terms of number of trips or the passengers, the forecasted by the consultant, the KV line feasibility study, the annual growth rate of KV line should be 30 to 35%. So which is unacceptable. Despite the prevailing low population growth scenario, if the forecasted, let's assume everything is happening as per the development in the project submitted, the project report submitted, the Western Province development area were considered realistic. The forecasted demand for KV line still cannot be met. Even the trip rate is 4 times the population growth rate of the Western Province. So that's mean you will not have, if that is really happening, you will not see any vehicle on the road. So no problem in closing the gates and you can play. The forecasted demand of KV line cannot be met. Even all the trips and passengers on the A4 line and other periphery line to come to the KV line, even what they have predicted is not adequate. So my main questions again, when the road traffic is at minimal level as they have estimated, and why the KV line need to be elevated. And because the at-grade crossing delay will also be minimal due to 2 reasons. One is the reduced vehicular flow based on their calculation. The KV line should attract some traffic, and the road traffic must be reduced. So there will be that should be considered when they are considering this crossing delays. And then number 2, the adjusted demand. Based on the adjusted demand, the peak hour train will be very less compared to what they have calculated, 7 trains per hour, which come down to 2 trains per hour. For say 4 trains per hour, so this frequency is getting less. So when you combine these 2 effects, the elevation is questionable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sivakumar. That was a very informative presentation of the demand estimation part relating to the Kalani Valley line electrification project. At this juncture, I would like to bring to the notice of our audience that we are very thankful for your presence. We are registering over 300 participants. We've been registering over 300 participants throughout the entirety of this event, and we hope to engage you. And we have a lot of questions trickling in. As I mentioned to you earlier, you are free to send your questions in Sinhala, Tamil as well as English. They will be taken up, and if at all we run out of time in the Q&A session, we will send answers in writing to all the participants at the end of the session, probably in a few days. So keep sending in your questions, because we want to ensure that all these questions are answered at the end of this session. Having said that, I would like to move on to the third presenter. The third presenter today is a unique individual who is a past chairman of the Institute of Engineers Sri Lanka, as well as being a past chairman of the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport Sri Lanka. And in addition to that, his expertise in the field is enormous, given the fact that he is a former general manager of railways. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Mr. Priyal De Silva to present his insights about this particular project.
Yeah, I hope you can hear me. Thank you very much for that introduction, Marvin. And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me first of all thank the two former speakers, Dr. Siamalapati and Dr. Sivakumar. Let me start with track design and operational speed. That is, my presentation will be a little technical, but I'll somehow see that I explain everything as to my ability to make you understand. Now, we have at the moment the current design, current track is a single track. The consultant design is a double track. The curvature at in the present design is there are curves ranging from 120 meters to 600 meters. Some of the curves which are less than 120 meters or 120 meters or less, there are 37% of such curves in the sector up to Homagama, and also less than 300 meters, there's 70% in that sector. And actually in consultant's design, there's no substantial realignment acquisition, mostly for double tracking. Maximum allowable operating speed is 40 kilometers per hour, 40 kilometers per hour set by Sri Lanka Railways. That has been so from the time that the heavy line was broad gauge in 1996, and the 40 kilometers per hour still exists that way. Because that is mainly because of the curves which are close to each other, and also the curves are in reverse direction in most cases, in most locations. Then also the consultants have assumed a speed of 70 kilometers higher, much higher than the SLR standards, and I presume that that is not quite safe. Number of stations, there are 13 stations where the trains are stopping for 1 minute, and consultants have proposed 15 stations where the trains will stop 30 seconds. That's a saving of 7.5 minutes on the run. Then time and commercial speed to Homagama, the scheduled time is 54 minutes at a commercial speed of 26 kilometers per hour, but the consultants have assumed that the train time is 68 minutes. And also consultants, in the consultant design, the scheduled time to Homagama is 42 minutes. To Avisavalla, similarly, is 2 hours 15 minutes at the moment, and in consultant design, it is 120 minutes, but of course, with a interchange from a diesel train to a electrified train at Paduka. Now, this is a train timetable of train number 9263, where you can see it leaves Mardan at 4:40 p.m. and arrives at Homagama at 5:34, where it has taken exactly 54 minutes to reach Homagama from Mardana. My main reason that I am displaying this this slide is because to tell you that this particular train has a stop of 1 minute at each of these stations up to Paduka. That means it is actually not making any crossings with any train coming in the opposite direction. So you can imagine, you can see very well that if case we double track someday or the other, this is the actual time that a train will take on a particular single line to reach Homagama, that is 54 minutes, and to Paduka it will go in 1 hour 20 minutes or so. Yes, to 1 hour 20 minutes to Paduka. Now, what is the claim by the consultant is the new design saves 26 minutes of travel time. Now, how did they arrive 26 minutes? Because they assumed 68 minutes as the present time of the train to reach Homagama, and that they will travel in 42 minutes, and therefore the 26 minutes saving. But we know that actual scheduled time is 54 minutes, and therefore there is an over assumption of 14 minutes. The saving due to reducing stopping times is we have 15 stations, and if whether it is elevated or ground, we can give a 30-second stop. That means 7.5 minutes we are gaining. Then saving due to fast acceleration, deceleration due to the electric multiple units compared with the diesel multiple units presently run is 10 seconds per station, and for 15 stations it will be 2.5 minutes. Therefore, the overall speed gain due to elevation will be only 2 minutes. Now, in that also, you will know the passengers have to climb up and down to the elevated station and come down at their destination, and ultimately for the passenger, there is no saving of time due to electrification. Now, the allowable speed calculations. Now, the distance up to Homagama is 23 kilometers, and at the moment there are 13 stops, consultant design 15 stops. Scheduled travel time is 54 minutes versus 42 minutes in consultant's design. Travel time, the stop time is 41 minutes, and in consultant's design it is 34.5 minutes. Then time loss in acceleration, deceleration is if you keep 45 seconds for both acceleration and deceleration. For 13 stops it is 10 minutes. For 15 stops in consultant design it is also 10 minutes, because we had assumed 40 seconds for the electrical multiple unit, because diesel multiple unit we have assumed 45 seconds. For electrical multiple unit we are assuming 40 seconds because it has a higher acceleration and deceleration facilities. Then travel time at allowable speed of 40 kilometers per hour is 41 minus 10 is 31 minutes, and in consultant's design it is 24.5 minutes. Distance and the maximum allowable speed. Now, leaving aside the distance for acceleration and the deceleration in the 23 kilometer section, for 13 stations we have 16.5 kilometers, and also in consultant design it is 16.4 kilometers. So then required average allowable will be 32 kilometers per hour. That is, you divide 6.5 you divide the 31 minutes by the speed, then you will get 32 kilometers per hour. Then same time in consultant design is 40 kilometers per hour. Then in case of the required average allowable speed, you get 37% of the distance is with less than 120 meter curves, and therefore you cannot speed more than 30 kilometers per hour. And in case of the rest of the distance, if we allow at average speed, and the weighted average of all these will be 37 kilometers per hour. So our 32 kilometers per hour is well within 37 kilometers per hour. So it is allowable. But in case of the consultants, it comes to, they have run 16.4 kilometers in 24.5 minutes. So the speed is 40 kilometers per hour. And that is over and above the weighted average of 37 kilometers per hour. So actually, the 40 kilometers per hour is actually about 25% more than the required average allowable speed at the moment. The deductions. The 30-second stop at stations can be applicable even at ground level, as long as passengers are able to get in and get out of the train. Double tracking will reduce train crossing times and increase reliability. Electrification benefits cannot be fully realized without increasing speed. So unless there's no use doing electrification unless the speeds can be increased and the journey time can be reduced. So no time savings by elevating the stations, only passenger access time will increase. So just because there's an elevated track, that doesn't mean there's any time saving. But of course, on the other hand, passengers will have to climb from ground level to the elevated platform, and which will take about a minute. Net time saving of train travel time is only 2 minutes, achieved by increasing speed by around 25% over the curves, which will be unsafe and uncomfortable to the passengers, because when you increase the speed, maybe sometimes to achieve a average speed of 40 kilometers per hour, the trains may have to travel on a speed between 60 and 70 kilometers per hour, which will be on reverse curve, which will be like a roller coaster ride, in short. Now, this is the curvature in meters for 100 meter, where the radius is 100 meters or less than 200 meters. The special the Sri Lanka standard speed at the moment is between 30 and 45 kilometers per hour. But the consultants have increased it to 40 and 57, between 40 to 57. Then in case of 200 meter curves and 300 meter curves, it is between 45 and 55 for Sri Lanka railway standard, and 57 to 70 in case of consultants. Then 300 to 400, it is 55 to 65 Sri Lanka standard, and 70 to 80 in consultants speed calculation. I don't want to go beyond that. I mean, I don't think in this Kalniveli line, with the present curves being as it is there, you can run anything beyond 40 kilometers per hour. So if consultants are recommended to run at 65 or 70 or even 80 kilometers per hour, that I am 100% sure it is not quite safe. Or on the other hand, there is a risk of derailment. Unless the trains run at an allowable speed of at least 70 kilometers per hour, they cannot maintain a speed of 40 kilometers per hour to cover the journey to Homagama in 42 minutes. Now, this again, we can easily compare with some of the mainline and coastline slow trains operated on those lines to similar to destination by way of distance travel. Because now, definitely now those trains especially are going up to about 70 kilometers per hour to reach the destination in about half an hour in a similar distance, or maybe about 1 hour in a distance to Avisavella. Now, this is the comparison. Compare with the main line. Travel time from Gampaha 26 kilometers is 21 minutes. Now, Gampaha is 26 kilometers, whereas Homagama is 23 kilometers. Now, Gampaha it takes 31 minutes, whereas Homagama it takes, consultants calculation 42 minutes. Our calculation at the moment, our trains run at 54 minutes. Then travel time to Mirigama, which is 54 kilometers, compared with Avisavella 59 kilometers. Travel time to Mirigama is 54 minutes. Commercial speed is 60 kilometers, which stop at Gampaha. Comparing with coastline, travel time from Panathura is 27 kilometers, which takes 37 minutes. Commercial speed is 44 kilometers per hour, stops at Mount Lavinia, Moratuwa. Travel time to from Alugama is 64 kilometers, 1 hour 20 minutes. Reductions, there is no advantage to the rail passenger on KV line by way of travel time reduction after spending 600 million USD on the elevated structure. And the infrastructure like escalators, elevators, and so forth. As sharp curves don't allow speed advantage of electrification. The only advantage of elevation is to road traveler, especially the car traveler, but is this savings adequately quantified? What should be done to KV line? Short term, double track on ground with road underpasses, overpasses or signalized crossings as intended, keeping same curves as posed by consultants, the same maximum safe speed can be achieved. Travel time can reduce from 68 minutes to 54 minutes, that is 14 minutes. Medium term, gradually acquire land and straighten curves to reduce travel speed for express trains to Homagama in 28 minutes, that is commercial speed of 50 kilometers per hour, and slow trains in 34 minutes, commercial speed of 40 kilometers per hour, with express to Avisavella in 1 hour 11 minutes. This will be comparable to the main line and coastline. Hence, straightening curves will be a prerequisite priority to provide a competitive service. In other words, the full potential of electrification cannot be achieved without straightening the curves. That requires to be emphasized. Long term, to treat any specific location where gauge separation is required to ease road traffic as and when necessary. That is, you might be able to have a flyover or an underpass and so forth. So, let me also say that consultants have not looked at the possibility of having underpasses across certain roads where the geography allows it to do so even. So those are some aspects that the consultants will have to look into in more detail. Now, safety and comfort issues. Without any acquisition and resettlement of encroachments, there is no access to evacuate passengers in case of any emergency, derailment or fire. In case of derailment, especially if they operate at higher than safe speed and or if track and wheel wear and DI is high, there is possibility that there will be serious damage to property and will even result in casualties. Hence, at elevated or ground level, acquisition is a mandatory requirement for safety of passengers. Moreover, keeping the curves as they are will increase passenger discomfort due to number of reverse curves, especially at the higher speeds proposed by the consultants. So that is the end of my slides. So thank you for your attention.
Very much, Engineer Priyal, for that insightful presentation. So we are having a lot of questions coming in, and we encourage you to use the Q&A tab to send in your questions. Now we are moving on to the next presentation, the last presentation of the evening before we move on to the Q&A session. And I'd like to introduce Professor Lalitha Gunaruwan. He's from the Department of Economics at the University of Colombo, an eminent economist, and he likes to introduce himself as a teacher at University of Colombo. So over to you, sir, for your presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Niles. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I must thank SLSTL for giving me this opportunity to expose what we have done as the committee appointed to review the projects by the Ministry of Finance. And so I'm going to focus in my presentation the economic perspectives of the Kalani Valley line development. The committee held several discussions when the proposal came to for review of the committee. And then we had several discussions with the Ministry of Transport officials and the Railway Department officials, as well as the Department of National Planning and other relevant people, officers. Plus, the committee also was privy to interventions and reports made by the Institute of Engineers, where several comments had been made in 2018 and 2019 regarding the project's development. Having perused through all these, committee requested the Ministry of Transport and the Railway Department to give more information and provide data and statistics for us to continue with our analysis. But unfortunately, the required information was not adequately submitted to the committee by the relevant authorities, particularly the project management unit and the railway department. The very important assessment that we have made in this analysis was that we wanted to cross-check the benefits and costs that they had been estimating in the consultants' reports, and that is why we requested this information. Unfortunately, we did not get those information timely for us to work out our own assessments. But then, having fetched our own information and our own analysis and our own knowledge, we undertook our examinations, and those findings were the ones that I presented on July 16th when we met with His Excellency the President. And my presentations at that meeting was on the KV line, the subject that we are discussing today, and not on any LRT. But then this cut, chop, and fabricated kind of video cut has gone viral and giving many misinterpretations to what I discussed in front of the President on that day. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, what was our main analytical observation? The fundamental observation that we made is that the capital expenditure was excessive. The planned capital expenditure for this project was US $1.4 billion, and that we considered excessive for a number of reasons. Firstly, that this estimate itself is a question because, as Dr. Tilak Simbalapiti explained, that had come down from US $2.5 billion in December 2018 to April 2019. And then this puts into question the entire reliability of the cost estimate. That how come that there can be this kind of a discrepancy within a period of say first 3 months and then again 4 months, from September to December and December to April? How can that there be that kind of a big discrepancy? And secondly, we also had the opportunity of comparing the feasibility estimates made by the Sri Lanka Railway, Ceylon Electricity Board, and the IESA jointly, as Dr. Tilak Simbalapiti said, in 2008. At that time, I was the General Manager Railway, so I was the one who, from the railway side, spearheaded this, initiated this feasibility study. And there, the estimate for Panadura-Wayangoda section in the main line and the coastline was only roughly US $250 million. And also that was a kind of a question that came up in a very substantive way in our analysis. How come that there be this kind of discrepancy? Then we found that a large portion of this cost was associated with the elevation of the track. The direct cost of the concrete structure itself to elevate the track from where it is today to 7 meters high cost about US $420 million, and that is just for elevated structure. But other associated elevation related costs, it would be even a few more $100 million US dollars. Therefore, the committee wanted to pursue the benefits associated with this elevation, and then this elevated structure became the subject of our incremental analysis that we pursued in the committee. Now, this proposal of elevation had several questions also. as explained very clearly by Dr. Vilasembrapitia, the main stated objective of elevation was removing the level crossings. So IESL also had questioned this estimated time saving advantage at these level crossings, if they are elevated, cannot be 3 minutes all over in all crossings. So there would be a kind of an overestimation of that benefit. And then, as Mr. Priyal Silva said very correctly, this elevation had been without straightening the existing curves. And as former general manager, I know how difficult and how unsafe if the speeds are increased without straightening these curves. And maybe that most of the people may be unaware that this whole exercise of 420 million for elevated structure has been made without straightening any of these curves. So the main advantage that one would expect from kind of railway track development would not be there, particularly of the electrification, where you want to get the speeds cannot be achieved because of this poor design that which we consider is inappropriate. So we went into examining the kind of incremental costs and incremental benefits associated with this elevation largely based on the consultant's own estimates. Now look at this. Now this is what we have done in our analysis. These are kind of 3 basic scenarios that we worked out. The first one is single track rehabilitation up to Avisavella. This red line is the cost. It's somewhere around 350 million, 400 million is the 460 million is the capital cost there. And then you have the double tracking up to Padukka, and then electrification, and where you have another 400 odd million as the the third scenario, track elevation, which also has about 220 million as elevation related costs. Now, to our dismay, we found that the first 2 interventions have incremental benefits outweighing incremental costs. So the incremental benefit cost ratio is greater than 1. Whereas when we go into elevation of the track, the elevated cost cannot be justified with the elevation related benefits, because there the benefit is only those vehicles who would be having a kind of a marginal advantage at level crossings, as Dr. Vilasembrapitia demonstrated in a classic case estimated at the Castle Street level crossing. Those benefits would be rather inadequate to meet the incremental cost of elevation. So incremental benefit cost ratio there is less than 1. Therefore, the committee could not agree to recommend the elevated structure. So we think that elevated structure cannot be justified by the incremental benefit cost ratio, which is less than 1. And other than this, Mr. Priyal Silva, former general manager, explained that the travel time advantage would be even 0 or even 2 minutes. Now, I told in front of the president that the advantage would be around 5 minutes only. That is because we calculated based on the actual train journey that had been made on 7th July 2020, which had run between Maradana and Homagama in 53 minutes. So with 1 minute stoppage at 13 stations, you can imagine that it can very easily come down this exaggerated time gain advantage. It would be only about 5 minutes, but now very eloquently, Engineer Priyal Silva said, now today's presentation, it can even be less. It cannot be even 5 minutes, it can be even 0. So what this means is that the committee had to go in to see why these mismatches are and how come that these people justified these. So we went into feasibility study analysis. You would be surprised what we found in this analysis. These are the 3 analyses that we have. The first one is on 9th September, and the second one is on 21st December 2018, and the last one was 11th April 2019. Now look at a few of these things which we found as in the committee are unacceptable. The total passenger daily trips in 2025 estimate was 480,000 in December report. out of which 19,000 would be the peak passenger demand according to that estimate. 3 months later or 4 months later, they estimate that the total daily passenger trips coming down from 480 to 273. But still for all, the peak direction passenger demand would still remain 19,000, 18,000, the same around. So there is a big discrepancy there. How come that 480,000 coming down to 273,000? Why did not it come down from 19,000 to 18,000? Dr. Siva very clear, very nicely presented. Their estimates are wrong, and those estimates are basically hugely exaggerated. And then another funny thing that we found in this analysis was, let me show you that discrepancy. See, in the September report in 2018, they had the total investment cost of 2.5 billion, 2,500 million. And then in the December report, that 2,500 million had come down to 1,300 million. Still for all, the present value of economic costs remained unchanged. So present value of economic costs was 1,700 million US dollars in September, and even in December it remained 1,700 million, in spite of the capital investment estimate coming down from significantly from 2,500 million to 1,300 million. And there again, from September to April also, you see the mismatch, where the ratio between the investment and the present value of economic costs. The investment cost was 1,328 million. PV of economic cost is greater than that, it is 1,700 million. Whereas when you go to April, the total investment has increased to 1,225 million, whereas the present value of economic costs have come down to 1,137 million. So these are inexplicable discrepancies in this sort of a project feasibility analysis, where the government is going to get committed for 1.4 billion US dollars in loans out of the poor man's treasury funds. And then the funniest thing in this case is, look at these investment costs, 2.5 billion, and look at the estimated benefits, 4.7 billion. And look at here in the April December 2018, the investment cost is 1.3, and the benefits same for the 4.7 billion. How come that the IRR remaining the same when you have two investment estimates with the benefits are the same? Now these are unacceptable, maybe mistakes, but unacceptable mistakes in a feasibility study done by an international company. And then what we did was, we went into detailed analysis of April 2019 report, and we put into the benefits and costs of estimates made by the consultant, and attempted to calculate the EIRR by ourselves. It's a simple exercise. You put the benefit stream, you put the cost stream, and you put the investment figures in an Excel sheet for the period that they covered, I think about 35 to 40 years period, and then you do a simple calculation. And we tried to see whether this 15.78 as EIRR is realistic, and we found that we can never arrive at this 15.78. And I invite all of you to go through this report. It is in public knowledge. You can find it out from the web and see whether you can come out with this figure. So what we found there was that these contradictory estimates in the reports put in question the reliability of the entire feasibility analysis. So the committee, the Ministry of Finance appointed committee chaired by me, could not accept this. And if we accepted it, then we would be doing injustice to our professional conduct, as well as doing a disservice to our general public. And then on top of this, as all other learned speakers mentioned, there were many other discrepancies. The daily passenger count has now revised downwards again to 176,000, even after this April report. And then the OD data has available for 2016 and not been used. And the passenger counts from 18,000 as projected, our estimate is about 8,000 passengers, and that would mean that about only 4 trains would be required to cater to this demand, and therefore the gate closure time, as Dr. Tilak Simbalapriya presented, would be meaningless and invalidated. So there is no justification for elevation. Plus, there is a big disadvantage in this whole case, which I presented in front of the president, which became kind of a misinterpretation by many people, that I was talking about a light rail system where I was talking about freight transport. Look here, this KV line is not a light rail system. It is a conventional railway, which was built for freight transport in the turn of the century, 20th century, and rubber transport from Sabaragamo to Colombo was on KV line. And KV line is projected to be, planned to be extended to deep Sabaragamo plus to Ruhuna, and freight transport has to be kept intact. And with this skeletal operation, without running a single freight train, even with this passenger diesel multiple units, only in 2019, we had about 5 million transported revenue on freight transportation, parcel transportation between Maradana and Homagama, just 7 stations in between those section which the consultants plan to elevate. So why are we crippling the KV lines, the future potential of freight transport? How many main factories are located near the KV line, and those factories are transporting their cargo for exports on the roads? Why can't KV line be used to transport freight? And we are talking about Aruakaru garbage dump being fed by Colombo suburban garbage transported by railway. So isn't Kotte Municipal Council, Maharagama Urban Council, how are they going to load their garbage containers into railway? Are they going to transport those garbage trucks right across the Colombo city limits, and then maybe transfer to a train rather than transport into KV line somewhere in this proximity of the railway line in Nugegoda or Maharagama or some other convenient location? These are questions that the people have to address in this country, because nobody has given any mandate to the Ministry of Transport, to my knowledge, to cripple the future potential of the KV line. The moment you elevate the KV line with concrete structures, 7 meter high without straightening the curves, KV line's future potential of realigning, straightening the curves will be totally forgotten for maybe for the next 100 years, and the freight transport possibility will be totally lost when you have this kind of elevation done. So this is why we think that the KV line project has to be rethought of. While the KV line has to be upgraded, developed and electrified, there is no justification for track elevation, and you can, as Mr. Priyal De Silva presented, can upgrade the track, color light signaling and automatic blocks and centralized train control and long loops and straighten tracks wherever possible. Mind you that we saw some estimates that the tracks can be straightened with $200 million. And then we immediately asked the question, why don't you straighten the track with $200 million rather than putting up a concrete structure to elevate at a cost of $420 million? So these are the questions that the logical project planners should ask. And then we can go for double tracking and station development, facilitating the passenger in training and retraining, and then electrification with electrical multiple units. Our estimate is that all these things could possibly be achieved at a cost of approximately $600 million. Now that will be less than half of this estimate made by these feasibility reports and consultants. And as Mr. Priyal De Silva mentioned, if necessary, when the main crossings are there, where road traffic and the railway train frequency are compared carefully, and if necessary, case by case basis, you can have road flyovers or underpasses as appropriate, rather than ruining the Kalani Valley line's future on this. And there is one more thing before I wind up, that is the economic rationale. Sri Lanka is a country with capital shortages, and we all know that. And we are debt stricken. Country's debt is around rupees 10 trillion, which is nearly 100% of the country's GDP. If you have foreign debt alone, it is 2/3, and if you take the local debt together, it is about 100% of the GDP. And therefore, it is our duty to maximum effort should be made to minimize further foreign borrowings wherever possible, we execute these things locally with our local money. And also, whenever we spend money, we have to make sure that unproductive capital expenditure would be eliminated, and we will not go for unproductive capital expenditure. Already our ICO is very high, incremental capital output ratio is very high, indicating capital inefficiency. We have been right throughout for the past 2-3 decades, we have been spending more and getting less, and that is why our capital efficiency is coming down. We can't continue like this. So it is our duty to make maximum scrutiny when capital expenditure proposals are entertained. If not economically productive, debt capital to be paid by Treasury would be a criminal burden on our future generations, because as pointed out, they plan to overload this burden on the railway passenger. If 130 rupees additional payment is going to be charged from the railway passenger, that is a crime, because railway passengers are not going to get any advantage, no time advantage, no parcel carrying advantage. Only advantage may be marginal is only for the car traveler, and you charge that one on the railway passenger is a criminal burden on our rail passengers. And if you are not charging from the railway passenger, then that will be overburdening our treasury, and that will be a criminal burden on our future generations. Ladies and gentlemen, therefore, I invite all the country-loving people to rethink about this project, and railway electrification has to be there. I'm the person who initiated in 2008 as railway general manager, and 2015, when that was dead already, I was the one who resurrected in 2015 as a secretary. So I'm all for railway development, I'm all for railway electrification, but not for these kind of inefficient and highly exaggerated debt funding projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Gunarwan. Given the time constraints, we have to expediently move into the Q&A session. So we will also be joined, in addition to the 4 presenters, Dr. Tissa Liyanage. He is the founding chairman and the managing director of Master Helis Consulting Group. He will also be part of the panel. I would like to hand over controls to a person who needs no introduction, Professor Amalis Kumarage, who's the head of Department of Transport and Logistics Management at the University of Moratuwa. He will be the moderator for the session. Over to you, Professor Kumarage.
Thank you, Nilesh, and a very good evening to our 300 guests who are here. Up to now, we had actually 16 questions before we started. I've not seen that before. And now we have another 60 plus comments and questions. So obviously, we are not able to dispense with all of your questions. And what we have decided is that we will try and combine a lot of these questions into one question that I will pose to the speakers, the panelists. And some of the others, I will ask the Sri Lanka Society of Transport and Logistics, being a professional institute, to try and put all answers for all of those questions and combine them into a document and circulate it among all the participants so that everybody gets educated by the questions that we could not ask. Now, going on to the Q&A session, I think we have only like 25 minutes left, but I would beg your indulgence to maybe go another 10 minutes more, because we have had a lot of facts being presented, a lot of matters being contested in terms of what the consultants have done. And I was reading something this morning. Somebody was asking whether we live in what is called a post-truth society, where truth is not what is necessarily coming out of scientific logic or economic rationale, but it's more about how you manage to convince an audience even with what is not true. And very often people want to hear that part of how they've been convinced and not really want to go beyond that. And so what I think has happened today is a fact check on the work that has been done by the consultants on one of the largest projects in Sri Lanka. And it deserves professional analysis, as my friend Gratian Piri says, a rigorous, why do we need a rigorous analysis, he asks. Because it's so big, and because we find that there are so many holes, somebody's got to look at it. Verite Research puts out these little boxes, news clippers, where they do something called a fact check. And very often they pick on things politicians say, and they say whether that is true or partially true or incorrect. So I think what we have done is also done a fact check on the KV line. And what the four presenters have done in their different ways is to contest the findings. Contest the findings on the demand estimation, contest the findings on the travel time, contest the findings on the economic evaluation. And well, I mean, if you put all of that together, basically that is something quite serious. And I think we need to take into account the fact that the Asian Development Bank, which is to finance this project, has also commissioned a peer review, which is not usual because we believe that they also have good reason to get a review done. So some people were asking in the chat today, why aren't some of the proponents of this project there? We've seen in social media a lot of people trying to promote this through various things, consultants associated with the project and so on. That's their job to promote it. But we do not want this to be a debate. People are used to debates and hear each other accusing. This is not. This is present facts to clarify facts. Certainly, we have gone before committees with the consultant. We have asked them for seminars, and none of that has really helped to correct the situation, and hence this seminar. Having said that, yes, we are always ready to meet the consultants and any of the project proponents in private or in public, even in a report session, if they have the answers to these contested facts. So having said that, I would actually like to move on to some of the questions that have been asked. And I would like to first direct my question, one of these questions, actually several people asked, to Dr. Siambala Pittia, who actually represented the IESL, Institution of Engineers, in the steering committee. And you're now coming public and, saying these things. Couldn't you have sorted this out in private? And, why are we trying to stop this project now? Why are we coming as people who are trying to sabotage a good project? Tilak, do you have an answer for that?
Well, quickly, of course, if anybody wants to sabotage this project, I will be the last person because my involvement through the Institution of Engineers on the railway electrification, the concept, as well as this specific project, which is now called the Colombo Suburban Project, spans over nearly 12, 13 years. So to your specific question as to whether these things could not have been sorted out in the steering committees, yes, of course, each steering committee had certain presentations and we give our oral comments. And then, of course, I'm representing the Institution of Engineers. I come back and report to the institution, sometimes to the council, and definitely always to the Transport Sector Committee. And the experts at IESL get together and prepare a comprehensive response to all the draft reports and more. So all this has been done. So most of the issues have been, in fact, ironed out. So some of the changes in the passenger forecast, reduction in the cost estimates were partly encouraged by the comments that we provided. But still, a number of major issues remained in the last version of the report that was issued in 2019. So it is at that point the Institution of Engineers decided to go to the next step. So it's not that it was immediately planning to go public on these issues. So it was after several one-to-one discussions, small group discussions, steering committee discussions, and then finally the Institution of Engineers decided that we will take one step at a time and perhaps make a submission to the Ministry of Transport, then to the Ministry of Finance, then to the Asian Development Bank, and as I said, finally to His Excellency the President last July. So it's a project that I personally want to be seen done and done correctly and at the correct cost and for the correct benefit. So the answer to your question is it has been tried, many achievements have been there, but a few more adjustments have to be done before this project is presented to hopefully the Asian Development Bank for financing.
Thank you, Dr. Siambalapitiya. I want to direct a number of questions I put together to Dr. Tissaliyanage. Right now, there are many new transport projects being proposed in and around Colombo. And Dr. Jagat Munasinghe is asking about the monorail, the 4 monorail lines that were announced yesterday. Parakrama Jayasinghe is asking about the elevated highway from Paliyagoda to Aturugiriya. Then Sujiva Premaratne just asked about the BOI proposal to have a high-speed rail link between Katunayake and Mattala going through Colombo. We also know about the JICA LRT, and there are yet 3 more electrification project proposals there. So KV line is one of many projects that we have at the moment, right? Now, do we need all of these projects? I remember somebody saying, looking at these, that most of these projects are using the same passengers to justify them. And certainly one would agree that we don't need all these projects. So as a transport planner and a practitioner as yourself, I mean, how do we come up as professionals? How do we, respond to all these different proposals that are coming? Is the one that's marketed best the best for us? What's your view?
Thank you very much, Professor, and thank you very much for organizing this. And good evening to everybody. Actually, it's a very vast question that you have asked from me at the very beginning. I have to say that actually there are so many projects going on in Colombo. There are elevated highways coming in and connected to expressways. That is going, one of the elevated highways you are connecting from Fort City to the Outer Circular Road. There are 3 stages. And we found that there are many LRT projects coming in, and now it is proposed so many other improvements and BRT projects and so many public transport improvements as well. But anyway, what I see is in this planning, there is a lack of integration of any of these projects. In these projects also, once I read this the report, I observed that many of such events there. Once you are doing a project, we should not look into single opinion. Like, I mean, the put in, when you are doing the analysis, we have to look in integrated manner. That means that how many passengers come into Colombo, then how this going to be increased, what are the development coming in, and how this development generates traffic, then where this traffic to be distributed. So in this KV line, I have to say that when you are planning this one, there should be something attracted from the road sector, and there should be some integration with the road sector, whatever the transport project coming in, because the road transport is dominating at the moment in Colombo. And there should be, we know that a lot of overloading traffic in Colombo city in main road links. So there should be attraction of the traffic and release of the traffic and release of the private transportation to public transportation in multiple way. And if I am correct, what I see in this project is KV line as a focus. As Dr. Sivakumar mentioned that there are forecasts there, numbers has increased, and still in the road traffic I have not seen there's a reduction. So how this traffic is coming, how these passengers are coming to these high numbers are very difficult to accept, very difficult to justify. Still the road transportation is getting higher, the traffic levels are getting higher. So how that comes? So what I feel is this: if you are having a large, investment like this, we need to have some kind of relief to the road sector, because road sector is the area that for the transportation we are spending a lot at the moment. So a lot of maintenance, a lot of construction, a lot of acquisition, a lot of congestion alleviation projects, signalization, overpass, underpass, so many things are happening. So we need to generate some, income from that area to public transportation. That's true. But at the same time, we need to discourage this traffic for the road traffic to have a capacity level matching. I mean, some kind of a balance in the road transport. What we need is to take the people to the city and not the vehicles or not any other kind of rolling stock. What we need is to people to come. So in this regard, what I feel is that any of these the projects has to be integrated, and there should be a collective results, and there should be a equity of all the passengers, all the people who are coming in. Then only there will be a kind of what I feel sustainable transport system. So I think for the questions I can say that way. In next question I can answer in detail, whatever related to KV line.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Zissa. Yes. Moving on from that, we have for Dr. Sivakumar, I put several questions together. There is Nishanta Kamalanathan asking, do these forecasts work? Have the forecasts worked in the past? And I would also support that question, because we have a port where the forecast ships do not come. We have an airport where the forecasted airplanes don't come. And so I think from a public point of view, probably, we don't have much confidence in these forecasts. So who is right? I mean, are you right or the consultants right? Because what you're saying is, even if you take all the passengers on the road right now and force them into the rail, we will still, pretty much be just barely able to fill the passengers, So how does that happen? And we also have a question from Gresham Piris again, asking, why do we need to bring all these people into Colombo? Wasn't the plan to decentralize Colombo? Isn't bringing more and more people into Colombo like a sort of an old development paradigm, right? So what's your answer on this? How do you see this overall picture of bringing, developing a lot of transport infrastructure to bring a lot of people into Colombo on the assumption that there'll be more and more people willing to come?
Thank you, Professor Kumar, and thanks for the questions raised. I think the answer is, you are very correct. Like those days, monocentric citrics, that's mean one nodal point is developing bigger and bigger and growing. while everything is got attracted to the single point of activity node. Whereas we have seen in the past, in the recent past, probably there are some decentralization happened in Colombo, even in Colombo, which are like decongesting the city, the hardcore of the city, like Maharagama development and Bala Bay, and also north side, south side. So you can see there are some urban development happened, but then all of a sudden, again I could quote the project here. This megapolis project has put them reverse all the ideas and trying to develop. Putting more and more development towards within the Colombo, and expecting 9.1 million population, which is not very realistic. In one sense, the size of the city is not enough to develop to that level. And even if you want to develop like in some other cities, micro cities, but well-developed cities, which need to go very vertical, which we are not such economically viable country to go for that. So your question is very correct. Like we need to go to the model which is what we have in the recent past, what we have trying to exercise to decentralize and utilize some of the suburban areas, rather more and more congesting the urban areas. And then, so this urban development is one of the fundamental question before we going for a modeling. So you have touched upon the modeling also. The modeling part is like what is happening now. That is the base case scenario is the very fundamental. Without knowing the existing scenario, we may not predict anything in the future. So if we neglect anything, that one mistake, generally the modeling will lead to some erroneous decisions. Then the negligence of the future developments. And when you say development of future developments, there can be overestimation, so there can be underestimation. So what has happened is to be blamed in some sense. The urban development control is also not very active in our cities. So we don't, even planners or modelers doesn't know exactly what is going to happen in the 10 years, 15 years down the line. So there are sometimes the modeling may go as you very correctly said, may go wrong. But but then some of the examples what you have taken, again I would say probably it doesn't go through the stringent check and evaluation.
Correct. Yeah, thank you. So I think one of the things that we have to be careful is that this may be the check and balance, and if we don't intervene at this time, we could have an infrastructure, very expensive infrastructure, like what I mentioned, again underutilized. So it's always good to go back and check the numbers. So thank you for your contribution. Prial De Silva, there is a question about the speeds. The question is, I mean, these are electric trains. Cannot they negotiate bends better than the diesel multiple units? Do you still have to apply the same standards and the rules as for the DMUs? A quick answer, please.
Yeah, thank you, Amal. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Actually, now this particular answer is rather technical, but I try to sort of explain it to my ability. Now, for any curve, there's an equilibrium speed. Equilibrium speed on a curve is dependent on the radius of curvature, and the super elevation. So maximum allowable super elevation on any curve is 140 millimeters as per the railway standards. However, the speed on a curve is allowed to be increased beyond the equilibrium speed with a deficiency in the super elevation up to a maximum of 75 millimeters. As long as the super elevation of the curve plus the maximum deficiency 75 millimeters does not exceed 140 millimeters.
So, Priyal, is that the same for DMUs and EMUs?
Yeah, so now it doesn't vary whether it is DMU or EMU, the curve can take a maximum speed with regard to its
so I suppose,
super elevation.
Yeah, so I suppose the question comes, considering that electric trains are lighter, I don't know whether that is correct because, it's not light rail. If it was light rail, perhaps they can negotiate bends faster, correct?
If it's a light rail LRT, it may be able to negotiate bend faster, but here the issue is this. Now, in the light rail, in the track geography, the bends are very smooth. Now, here what happens is soon as one bend is for the right hand side, the next bend comes onto the left hand side. Okay, it's like we call it a reverse curve, right? Now, in such an instance, speeding excessively can derail because half of the train is taking the right turn while the next half of the train is taking the left turn at the same time. So actually, between two curves, there has to be a train length which is straight. That is not to be seen in the Carnivali line in most of the places, most of the locations. So because of that reason, in the case of the consultants have calculated the speeds on curves with maximum deficiency of 75 millimeters added on to an allowable super elevation of 140 millimeters, making a total of 215 millimeters.
Yeah, okay.
Very, very excessive.
Right, thank you. Thank you. In the interest of time, I'm going on. I will ask this question from Professor Gunaruwan, and after that, I will ask all the panelists to pick one question you see on the Q&A that you like to answer, any question, and you have basically 1 minute to answer that after this one. So please be ready. Any one question that we have not been able to answer so far, particularly the last few, I have not been able to look at it. So, Professor Gunaruwan, there are many people who are asking about this incremental analysis or the incremental benefit. There are some people, particularly Indika Fernando, who is saying that this is only a criticism. Is there anything positive coming out as a proposal? So how would you defend your incremental solution as a positive approach? I mean, is that also not constructive? How would you, because in a way you are repackaging something that looks bigger, better, flashier, you are reducing its scale and scope. Do you still say it is constructive? And there's also the question asked whether by Tushe Shantan, whether if the number of trains is less, if the number of passengers, and Amal Megawat is asking, if there are less passengers, will the project be viable? Will electrification be viable? So if you can look at all of that and give a short answer, please.
Yeah, the very short answer I can give, incremental approach is very positive. It is not constructive or retarding. Incremental approach is you work out an incremental effort that you put and see whether that incremental effort is generating sufficient benefits. This is not only in engineering or projects or capital, any effort that you put, it is not worth the additional effort if you don't generate additional incremental benefits. That's it. So in this case, it is very positive. What we are saying is go as far as your incremental investment generates more than what you produce out of that investment. ඒක හරියට අර බේතක් දෙනකොට වගේ තමයි. You give a beta an incremental dosage, you get cured. But after some time, you give more incremental dosage, you might probably start getting negative effects. So you stop where the incremental benefits are generating positive incremental, incremental costs are generating positive incremental benefits. That's it. So it is very positive. It is not retarding. It is constructive. Secondly,
can you illustrate that in terms of what you're proposing as an incremental approach and what has been proposed by the consultant? Where would your incremental approach go? What will it include? What will it not include? And over what period of time?
Right. Now, what I presented in my last slide was basically that when you bundle everything together, the total investment, you will not see the picture of any individual incremental effort. So what we did was we started incrementally analyzing. Okay, you first go and see track improvement, the existing track improvement, single track and signaling, and then improvement. And what are you going to gain with that? And that may be done quickly, easily. It is low hanging fruit. You can get it out. And then you go and further electrify, or you straighten the curves, and you may be going into for longer loops and having more crossing stations. Now that is another incremental investment. When you do that, are you going to get anything more than what you got earlier? So then it permits you to go for that step also. And then thereafter you go and say whether you are going to have elevation, right? Okay, what is elevation? And when you have elevation, elevated cost, what are you going to gain in addition to what you have already got without elevation? So that is where we found that elevation is having a negative kind of lesser incremental benefit than the incremental cost. So you have a BC ratio, incremental BC ratio of that component negative. So anything less than incremental, elevation related costs can be permitted through this analysis. So this analysis is very nice, and it is a practice that we all do in our project appraisal. And I'm surprised that why this aspect was not looked at by the analysts in this case.
So the thing about will this be justified with less passengers? I suppose the answer to that would be, see, if the line is straightened, even if you have less passengers, they will have greater time savings.
Exactly. So,
right? So in a way, there's no point just front loading it with more passengers, each of them having very little time saving or even none, and actually straighten the line over time and ensure that all the passengers, not just to Homagama, but Avissavel, or if somebody extends it beyond, will actually benefit in the long term. Is that the answer?
Precisely. I mean, what we should do is there are three important points to consider. Number one, what the railway passengers are getting out of this investment. Now, it was very clearly presented by Dr. Siva and Dr. Sembalapiti and engineer Priyaldi Silva that passengers are not getting any time advantage. And also, we also saw that the advantages that we have in freight transport will be lost. So what are the advantages that the railway passenger is getting on this? It looks nothing. So if we are to get people to railway, more people from road to railway, it is not just electric train which is going to give it. It is not just that the elevator track which is going to get it. Show us the tangible benefits to the railway traveler. It has to be lesser travel time. It has to be more comfortable travel and those kind of things, and maybe freight transportation and other kind of stuff. If that is not there, why are we spending money on loans? That is basically the question. If you straighten the track and if you have realignment, as you said, then we will have speedier trains, 80 kilometers per hour, just like main line, just like coastline. You can probably clear this Avissavel section in 1 hour, and then it will have some meaning.
Thank you. And I think I'll just open the floor now for the panelists to answer, maybe starting with Dr. Tilak Sembalapitiya, then Dr. Tissaliyanage, Dr. Sivakumar. followed by Engineer Priyal De Silva, and finally Professor Gunarwan. Over to you, gentlemen.
I will use my 1 minute in the most efficient way. First, I will take a question on electricity. Mr. Atula De Silva is asking whether there will be adequate supply of electricity. So let me give you some numbers. The estimate is that when electric multiple unit, which is, let us say it's an electric power set, when it accelerates, it takes about 2 megawatt. So that's a lot of power, but then we don't expect all the train sets to be accelerating at the same time. So of course, there is a calculation in the project documents. So providing that amount of power to the railway traction system should not be a problem for CEB. It will not be anything beyond 2% of the national demand at any given time. Secondly, Mr. Amarasiri Pereira has asked, isn't the main line and the coastal line, Panadura Veyangoda, what's happening? So as I said in my presentation, the feasibility studies for the remaining 3 segments of the Colombo Suburban Railway, that is Colombo Rambukkana, Colombo Kalutara South, and Ragama Nigambo. These feasibility study reports have now been released in the public domain in the project website. So you yourselves can have a look. The answer to your question as to whether there is funding for this, when these projects will be implemented, that I do not know. That depends, of course, whether the feasibility reports and the cost estimates are reasonable, whether they need any revisions, etc. So when that is done, I believe the government should, as we have said for decades, the first segments to be electrified should be the segments on which the passengers are already there and suffering. So therefore, Panadura Veyangoda or extended to Polgahavela Kalutara South perhaps should be the segment that we should be focusing on first until we do a re-evaluation on the KB line. The last question I will want to take is from Pushpa Gamage about what's happening in the Kandy Suburban Railway project. So the Kandy Suburban Railway project, the feasibility study is already approved by the Asian Development Bank, as we see in the documents in the public domain. So I believe that study is starting, but I do not know of a steering committee arrangement where the designs can be discussed as they are being done. So officially, there is a design activity going on for the Kandy Suburban project.
Thank you, Dr. Tissa.
Okay, actually, I have not been focused any questions from any audience, but I can take few questions that is given by this Mr. Pires. He's talking about regarding the extension of this railway from Colombo to Hambantota through it has to be actually through Avisavila, Ratnapura, and Bilipiti and Hambantota. So in that case, actually, what we have to focus is that everybody is complaining about this cost of the project is very huge at the moment, and in that case, there is no provision for freight transportation. I'm very much concerned of this freight transportation. You know, giving some kind of not provision for freight transportation in the railway line, because it is not a very good solution for any transport system, any country, because once the infrastructure is available, we should not abandon that for any reason without having a very critical analysis. For example, if you are doing a road sector projects, even a small culvert, we are not abandoning without having a very good hydrology study. We know that there is some reason that it has been done. So because the freight transport, it was the main orientation in history of railway system. So now we are talking about the passenger transportation, just focusing on Colombo traffic. But in future, we have to have a very good connection beyond this one. That's true. Actually, we are very, very concerned of that question, that we have to keep the provision for extension. And one thing I want to focus in another question regarding sensitive analysis. Actually, I think that part has been already explained, Professor Gondwan. But I have to say that taking this number of 56 numbers of crossings, road crossings, they have taken that both VOT, value of time of people, as well as the VOC for justification of the economic gains of this project. So what I see is that in this section, out of these 56 numbers, there are few only having the large scale traffic levels, whereas it's stopping maybe in future, maybe 1 minute or 1.5 minutes. But you have to make sure that the way that calculation has to be done, because the transport project, if we are taking the value of time of people, that has to be some kind of productive value of time, not by picking up 1.5 minutes multiplied by number of people, their users. It is not going to give you any sense, because staying in the traffic jam 1.5 minutes, it's not productive. At least we have to have 15 to 20 minutes savings for some productive, the calculation productive level of savings of time, because you know that even there are large number of intersections in Colombo, so whereas they are signalized. So in average, you have to 1/3 of the time you have to wait for their for average user.
Right.
So in that kind of thing, I think that is when we are doing the sensitive analysis, we have to take this one first for the benefit cost analysis. Then we have to go by 20% reduction and 20% benefit reduction and the high cost and everything. So I think that part is still missing there. So we have to, that's why Professor Kumar has mentioned that we have to critically analyze these things in the future.
Yeah. So you're saying basically every crossing must be analyzed on its own merits of economic viability. Yeah.
Yes, separately,
Okay.
because different traffic levels there.
Dr. Sivakumar.
Thank you once again. Let me couple some of the questions which I read. One is about the modal shift from the private vehicle to the public transport, which is, yes, I think I would say that in our modeling exercise, this is already incorporated for the knowledge. What I'm saying is this shifting from one mode to other mode is already considered. But then your question is very specific. Then better the mode of transport, particularly we are talking about KV line. So the mode of transport become faster and comfort and sophisticated. So the attraction will be more and more, and the road users will be shifted to KV line. Of course, there is no doubt in that. We have done that in the modeling also. But then, as I said in the presentation, there is a limitation. This limitation is there will be an attraction, definitely, but the attraction will be limited by where you are coming from. That's been the land existence, whether you close to the line or away from the line, whether you are taking any other modes of transport to come to the line. And so these kind of a spatial resistance will play a major role in attracting the people to the fixed line, which is the railway-based lines. So that's why any mode of transport, any very highly attractive mode of transport, generally we can expect maximum of 30 to 35% of the attraction to new lines, which is faster and comfort. But then expecting more than that is not realistic, as I said in the presentation. Unless otherwise, the urban forming and urban controlling is happening, not overnight, but we plan for 15 years and then motivate the people to come closer to the line, which is part of the development project, and then keep the density growing, activity growing along the line. Then you can expect little more than 30 to 35. That is the realistic.
Right. Yeah. And, particularly in the Western province, I think actually compared to large cities, our travel distance is not very long. And we know that, the train is actually preferred when the travel distance is very large. So actually in Sri Lanka, in Colombo, it's very unlikely that a train will carry more than 40-50%. And the 86% is definitely something which will not happen. Can we go on? Sorry, I interrupted you, but we have to move on to Priyal. You want to say something?
Yes, now Mr. Nipuna Madugala has asked about whether this same train can go on the coastline as well as the main line. Yes, actually the main issue is that it has to be a seamless travel, That is, the same train should be able to go up to Polgahavla or on the coastline up to Karutara, so that passengers need not get into another train and go to their destination. Then there was another question with regard to the split platform. Now, the split platform is another issue where crossings, when a train comes into a station and it has to stop before the railway level crossing. So then there's a bit more time taken for the gates to open, because train has to wait till the passengers get down and other new passengers get in. So what we suggested was that particular platform should be moved away from, to the other side of the gate, to the other side of the level crossing, so that the train will pass the level crossing and stop at this particular platform. That is called a split platform. Now, again, the people who get down at the split platform will have to go under the, will have underpass like at Borala Junction, so that they could either go to the other platform or they can select whatever road that they prefer to go to their destination through the underneath tunnel. That is the second thing. The next thing, next question is actually with regard to the long distance train. It's not a question as such, but this is my my thought. Now, from most of the other lines, people come to office from Kandy, 115 kilometers away from Colombo, from Mahabur, about 125 kilometers away from Colombo, and even from Putlam, about again 100 kilometers away, and not from the KV line. KV line only from Abhisabella 59 kilometers. So why not we extend the KV line also to 100 kilometers, maybe to Ratnapura or little beyond, so that people can come to work to Colombo if they by train. If that is the case, the speed of the train, KV train, Kalimedi train will have to be increased. That means the tracks have to be straightened out. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Priya. Siva, I interrupted you. Is there something quick comment you want to make?
No. There was one question. There was a question that what is the solution then? Then I think everybody has said we are not stopping the KV line development. The KV line should be developed and it's electrified, but it can be done. It's feasible at grade with all numbers what we have presented. So conclusion
and
is
with the curves straightened so that you can actually get the best benefit of electrification. Because now you are actually not getting the benefit of electrification because the curves are there. Finally, to Dr. Gunarwan. Hello? Professor Gunarwan, are you there?
Do you hear me?
Yes, please proceed.
Yes. I would pick up one question raised by Mr. Pathum Tarindu, which is also spilling over to a question raised by Ms. Sunetra Aponsu. This is regarding the presently congested trains, and the trains are not running in time. And what Pathum Tarindu is saying is that you people are not train travelers and you don't know what the people are experiencing in the trains. Mr. Pathum Tarindu, I am a railway passenger. I am going by railway and I am a frequent traveler by railway. And I know the sufferings of the railway passenger. That is precisely why I am telling you these things, because your problem of congested trains and trains are getting delayed will not be addressed simply by having an elevated railway track. What has to happen is, for you to have delays minimized, you need to have faster train runs, and for you to have congestion alleviated, you need to have more capacity in the trains. So provide more capacity, and also you provide more capacity and run faster trains will not happen by elevated track. Now, what is going to happen is, if you elevate the track, that elevation, the cost will come onto your shoulder without having any benefit on you. Now, the estimates made that you are going to pay additional 130 rupees if your current ticket is 100. So your charge is going to be 230. What is the advantage you are going to get? Double zero. And that is where the problem is. You should pay for what you get the benefit. Now, all right, now with this project, you have elevator track and you are not going to get any benefit, but you are going to pay. That is at least something, because you wanted this project and you are paying for that. What if that the government has to pay for it? What if the treasury has to make the burden on it? That means the person who is living 100 miles away from Colombo in a rural village will have to bear it by the වක්‍ර බද්ධ අර සීනි හැන්දේ තියෙන වැට් එකෙන් පවා මේකට ගෙවනවා. ඒක පව් නැද්ද? So Mr. Pathum Tarindu, please understand that half the population in this country, nearly half the population in this country are very poor, and they are earning less than $2 a day. And if the burden goes onto their shoulder, that is not only wrong, it is a sin. Eka pau. E nisa api benefits තියෙනවට විතරක් වේදන් කරමු. I am with you as a railway traveler. You should shout for investment by the government for more capacity in the railway and faster train travel. That is why we want electrification of the railway line. That is why we want straightening the curves if possible. That is why we want double tracking if possible. That is why we want more capacity train, but not this elevated railway track, which will cripple all of us. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And I'm really surprised and encouraged that we still have over 200 participants, even though we are 23 minutes over time. Just permit me to try and answer a couple of questions that came in last, asking whether we are doing anything about sorting out the problems of traffic congestion in the short term. And I think if I go back to the transport plan for Colombo master plan that was done when Professor Gunarwan was the secretary of the ministry, together with the University of Moratuwa and JICA, the plan was that in the short term, bus sector would be improved. In the medium term, the railways would be improved in the 5 to 10 years. And the rapid transit and so on, we really need in this country, because they're expensive to build, they are expensive to operate, only probably in the 20 to 30 years. But it seems that with all, what we are hearing now, that plan has been completely inverted. We are seeing all the rapid transit projects coming now at very large price tags. LRTs, MRTs, high-speed trains, but really nothing for bus reforms or development, which can be done very quickly. Bus reforms in the entire country can be done for less than half the cost of the savings of the Kalini Valley line. So I think government needs to address those issues in order for us to go ahead in a logical manner. And we cannot always be...
Just to say one thing, in 2015, there was a proposal to construct a railway line, conventional railway line from Dematagota to Battaramulla. The cost estimate done by the CECB was just $30 million, which could have been very easily constructed locally by the Sri Lanka Railway. Nobody is asking why those projects have been put onto the dustbin. The people are asking why this 1.4 billion expenditure for probably for nothing that we are talking about, other than maybe electrification and other things, without straightening the curves and without having time advantage. The people are after those. I think there is something seriously wrong in our way of looking at problems. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So the way ahead I see is that, as the speakers have said, this is very constructive suggestions as to how this project can be re-engineered for better value for the country, so that we spend less, better value for the rail passenger, so that the ticket price doesn't go up 130%, and better value in terms of being able to travel faster, and also that it will be something that will complement and integrate with the other modes of transport. So I think that is the intention. So in terms of the way ahead, I think we are all awaiting the ADB's peer review and how the government would look at that. And we believe that the government would also look at, in addition to the comments of the IESL and what Dr. Gunaruwan's committee seems to have advised, also the SLSTL's position in this, which we have presented to you today. So thank you very much for your participation. And as I mentioned at the very outset, we will be endeavoring to answer all your questions through a response sheet, which will be emailed to you. And some of you are asking whether some of these presentations can be made available. I have to ask the speakers, and I'm sure most of them would have no objection, in which case, please send us an email whose presentation you want, and we will send to those of you who ask. We are willing to we are willing to share everything that is, professionally done. We have nothing to hide. So once again, thanking everybody on the panel, thanking everybody who participated, and particularly those who are still with us. I hope your 2.5 hours has been educating, that you have not only learned something, but you have also got involved, engaged in looking at these projects, because if we do that only, we can actually prevent bad projects or even good projects from becoming bad, and to be able to use the money that we can borrow with difficulty into essential projects that will actually solve the problem for us and for the next generation. So thank you for your patience and your understanding. Apologies for not being able to answer all the questions, but have a good night, and hopefully all of our efforts will lead to a better transport in the future. Dream well, at least about that tonight. Good night to everyone.
Thank you. Right.
Thank you.